Global Subliminal Control Grid, Nil Sanders, Black Ops, Beyond MK Ultra, Pattern Recognition, latest leak project. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We have returning guest Nil Sanders with us. If you go to nilsandersmindcontrol.com, you can learn more about Nil and the nefarious mind control tactics used throughout the brain drain media, news, television, and radio programming. Author of Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own, Volumes 1 and 2. Have you ever wondered if politicians, CEOs, and other influential speakers have the natural ability to control people's minds or influence people in subtle and subliminal fashion? Do you personally get emotionally attached to different candidates running for political office? Then you might be influenced via subconsciously and not even know it. Hence, your thoughts are not your own. Nil, we are on different sides of the world in completely different time zones. You are in beautiful Nottingham, home of the archetypal icon, Robin Hood. How cool is that? Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. It's a pleasure to speak with you at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be invited back. It's not as cool as you would think. I'll tell you that now. Like, in case anyone was going to come to Nottingham and think, "Oh wow, I'm going to bask in this Robin Hood loveliness," it's it's a very small city. It's not very good at all. But hey ho, what can you do?
Well, you are where you are, and it seems like people are raised in certain locations sometimes for specific reasons. But it's funny, we talked before the show, and you were telling me about how Robin Hood really isn't exploited like you would think he would be in that area. It's kind of, if you ever go to Roswell, New Mexico, everything there has an alien face on it because of the Roswell crash. Even the McDonald's has a UFO on the sign. So it's just, that's what you think of when you think of Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, to be, there's Shield Forest, which is apparently the forest where I used to live and such like that. But it's just bizarre the way that you'd think, this is an international thing. You've got films with Kevin Costner and Russell Crowe and Errol Flynn and all these people, incredible stars. You would think they would capitalize on it, and for whatever reason, they just don't. And I don't think it's humility. I think it's laziness, to be quite honest. I don't think it's like, no, let's just play this one cool. I just don't think anyone's got the wherewithal to do anything with it. But hey ho, what can you do?
Exactly. Just maybe it's a good thing. Maybe for now, if it got to that point, you'd have people coming from all over the world with Robin Hood outfits on. And go, where's he at, man?
Well, maybe, but hey ho, what can you do?
Right. So if we could get into, I watched the presidential debates, both of them so far, and the first one I looked at, and I'm watching these guys going, seriously? These are our best two options? It's just a slap in the face on both sides. But there was a couple of good points, I think, that Donald made last night as far as military tactics when he said, well, if you're going to go blow a country up, it's probably not a good idea to give them 4 to 6 weeks notice and tell them when you're going to attack them. It'd be a much better idea to just go in silently, take out the top brass, and then, then when it's done, you go tell the media about it after that. But just the way the whole system's played, there's so much money and profiteering in defense contracts, etc. That's just the way the world turns, and that's a whole other episode. But
I agree, but wouldn't that be a war crime?
To go, you mean take somebody out silently through the night?
Yeah, without due process or whatever. Just I assume that these options are on the table, and there is an argument that basically they want to draw out wars and such like that. But I really don't know, to be quite honest.
I'm not a defense contractor expert, and that's actually something I should do more research into because I'm sure it'd help with some of the shows that I do. But if you look at it from a logical standpoint, if you want to win a war, it's probably not the best idea to give your enemy your insider info. But regardless, it's just crazy the times we live in. I think that all these wars and proxy wars that go on are kind of orchestrated at certain levels anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. They're profiteering. They're corporate wars, aren't they? This is the point of them. They're a reason why why certain people are targeted, and they're essentially resource. Like a lot of the time, all of the sort of most recent wars, in fact, most of the wars are essentially they're ways of stealing resources or stealing land or influencing political change in an illegal manner that is justifiable in the eyes of the general public. So it's easy to say stuff like that, but it's very it's a microcosm of a very, very complicated issue. There may well be an element of truth in that and such like that. And so, yeah, we want to end wars as quickly as possible, but I think that ignores the reasons that people go into wars, which is the profiteering and such like that. I don't think it's as straightforward, as simple as that.
Well, that's where the mind control comes in my opinion, and maybe we could talk about that because you've written extensively on mind control. When the media, it seems like you've got this problem reaction solution. Let's go back to 9/11 for a second. Before 9/11 happens, several months prior, the media literally is just pushing down people's throats in the mainstream news. Al Qaeda showing video footage over and over again of bin Laden and his homeboys going across a bunch of monkey bars with AK-47 strapped to their back.
Oh yeah, that film that was filmed in Pakistan, yeah.
And just over and over and over and over. So when 9/11 happens, the immediate thought process in everybody's minds, and plus they were really bashing Saddam Hussein as well. So at least in America, most people's mindsets when they saw the towers collapse, it's Al Qaeda and it's Saddam Hussein. They're in on it together. And so what our military does is they go in after Saddam Hussein and they go after bin Laden. But people get all patriotic. They think that, okay, we need to join together, hold hands, kumbaya for each other, but go attack everybody else. It's not a part of this system. So it seems like fear is so powerful in the subconscious that the powers that be know how to literally influence the world and put a veil over most people's heads, and they can't see through the BS.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were many lies in that. I mean, one of the most important lies was that Iraq had obviously nothing to do with it, and they were actively fighting against Al Qaeda. So there was no connection between the Iraqi government and Al Qaeda either. And so that was a further lie. I mean, I am strongly of the belief that it wasn't really Al Qaeda that caused the attack. So there's another lie. But the problem is that, or the scenario basically created an incredible tension in people. It was, it's an incredibly traumatic event, and people don't. When trauma happens, that people don't tend to want to go, right, okay, let's sit down calmly and think about this. They want quick answers, and this is where people can start to manipulate you. And this is certainly what was seen in the American media. I think it was the day afterwards that George Bush essentially gave a speech saying, I think he actually said, I'm sure he actually said the words, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists, basically saying that, look, do exactly what we say, we'll sort it out for you. Like showing that sort of archetype of a parent or whatever, an authoritarian figure that can come in and solve all your problems for you, like particularly when you're in a traumatized state. And the thing about trauma is it tends to it makes you malleable. It wipes your brain essentially, or it can wipe your brain, and it basically leaves you in a state whereby you can be, for want of a better word, programmed. This goes back to sort of Pavlovian conditioning and such like that. He discovered that these dogs that he was training, they'd lost all their conditioning because they nearly drowned, and basically they'd lost everything that they'd learned, and then you have to relearn them, reteach them certain things. But if you can use this mechanism of trauma, it can basically reduce people to a vegetative state. It can reduce people to if you think of the example of like a child basically who's lost in a supermarket or something like that, they become completely helpless and will look to anybody for help and reassurance, and sort of shrink into themselves. That's exactly the sort of response that is gained by, even in adults, by extensive trauma, particularly if you do it again and again and again and again and again. And I'm sure we've mentioned this before, but this is essentially by sheer coincidence, for whatever reason. This is the sort of the raison d'etre of the Tavistock Institute, which is a psychological sort of think tank connected to military and industrial complexes and corporate entities and such like that in the UK. And Kurt Lewin essentially said that this is what we want to do. We want to say this is the best way to control nations. This is a way to make them yearn for an authoritarian figure to come in from a senior position and basically sort the world out for them.
Now, Tavistock, they were involved, or maybe still are involved, with a lot of the bands that are really popular, right? They're heavily invested in media.
Oh, right, yeah. Like, I mean, it's difficult to say, really. Not that I know of. With the sort of, I mean, they're interested in all aspects of psychology. Like they're interested in family psychology, child psychology, workplace psychology. They're interested in training corporate entities, CEOs of massive blue chip organizations like Unilever and BP and such like that, in authority training, teaching them to be better CEOs and more productive CEOs. They also offer the same service to politicians and aspects of the British and American military, and also surprising entities like the postal service and such like that. To teaching these organisations to work to the Tavistock sort of ideology essentially, and they were sort of they were completely behind the startup of certain organisations in America, like Stanford Research Institute and the National Institute of Mental Health and the Esalen Institute and MIT and the Wharton School of Economics and that type of thing. So they certainly have a broad ranging brief, so to speak. I'm not sure about the sort of entertainment arm of it. I wouldn't be at all surprised. I've heard of the concept of them starting the Beatles and writing the Beatles songs through the work of Theodore Adorno, but I don't. There's only one source for that, to be quite honest. And the work that Adorno was doing on music was about atonal music and such like that, and he wasn't a fan of pop culture and such like that. So I don't know as that's true. It may well be. It comes from the is it the Coleman book, I believe, but it may well be true. He probably knows more about it than I do. But other than that reference to it, I've never seen anything that would suggest that was true, to be quite honest.
Now, Tavistock also, if they're connected with different colleges and have a lot of influence, I wonder about when I read news articles that come out a lot with Stanford University or other institutions that say, we found planet X, we found Nibiru, or they won't say they found Nibiru, they'll say they found a new planet every other year, it seems like, and they'll make it sound as if it's planet X and it's incoming, but it's not at the same time. So it's like they're playing both sides of the coin with these articles. What are your thoughts on that?
It's like it's an experiment, seeing what people are going to do with the information. It's a reaction and stimulus experiment. They start certain projects. I mean, it was out of places like the Esalen Institute that the human potential movement started. This is not to denigrate anybody that's involved in this type of thing, but stuff like transcendental meditation and yoga and to an extent the free love movement and such like that came out, the human potential movement. And it was, provably started as an offshoot of MK Often, which was an offshoot of MK Ultra. Now, it doesn't mean that there's anything nefarious about it, but what it means is that they were using this as a way to study behavior and a way to study reaction and a way to study how they can manipulate people. And it's as simple as that. They weren't looking to learn anything from people they weren't looking to let's see these flower children and they can teach us how to be better people. That's not what it was about. What it was about was, okay, let's create a situation and see what our rats in a maze do. And you know what? That might have been a very pleasant scenario or situation. There might have actually been some very positive outcomes with it and such like that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this was, particularly this aspect of it, was provably part of an experiment and a documenting expedition, basically trying to study the hippie, so to speak, in this particular scenario. So, they have their fingers in all sorts of pies.
Now, what are they doing now? What's the cutting edge stuff that you've seen that they're taking advantage of on the people?
Well, the most up to date technology that I've heard about, silent sound is quite old hat now. That was used in the first Gulf War, actually. So that's many years ago now. That's
time out. Can we jump into that? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
That I've heard that there was these mind control tones and stuff used specifically in the first Gulf War, and that's why many of the soldiers just gave up so quickly, but I haven't been able to pinpoint that via fact. But I've talked to some insiders, literally, that were a part of these mind control programs. I mean, even all the way up to Michael Aquino. This guy is the military top brass, and there's a lot of, as far as mind control tactics and getting into the head of people. So let's talk about that.
Well, it's called Silent Sound or S-Quad or the S-Spectrum or 4-Quad, or there's loads of different variant names for it. I believe it was a chap called Oliver Lowry that actually patented it. But essentially, what it is sub-oral manipulation. There's sometimes they use music to cover it, sometimes they don't. It's messages that bleed into your brain that you don't pick up on a conscious level, but you definitely pick up on a subconscious level. And what these messages do is, certainly what was reported, and this was reported in Newsweek, for crying out loud, they were putting feelings of despair into the Iraqi soldiers. Now, there's several sort of proofs that this actually happened. I mean, you could take the sort of the footage where you see dozens and dozens of Iraqi soldiers, like basically just, weapons above their heads, throwing the weapons down, hands above their heads, walking in lines. They were in concrete bunkers. They were very well embedded. There was no real reason for them to give up. Now, what is certainly strange is that there was a quote that was given on a news channel from a general, and I don't have the name, but it is in my first book. And basically, he let slip that they were well embedded in, but we sent over a few helicopters with some speakers on there. Speakers meaning, radio, speakers, speakers like you would have in your hi-fi system. God, I'm old. Like, no one has hi-fis anymore, do they?
Oh yeah, anyway, man, I got a clip surround system that's badass.
Oh well, there you go then.
Bingo.
Well, cool. But basically, yeah, the speakers went over and they immediately sort of came out. In the Newsweek article, it was they basically interviewed certain people from PSYOPs organizations, and they explained the process. This is the silent sound is this technology where it puts debilitating negative thoughts into people's heads so that they feel such despair that they actually, basically give up. They don't want to fight anymore. And they gave one account of a 5-star major general running in circles, desperately trying to surrender his entire platoon to a remote controlled helicopter with a speaker and a camera on it. And again, the military denied this. That particular article disappeared. You can't find it. It was reported in the British media as well. I think it was on ITV. But this article sort of disappeared. It was completely memory holed from all the different sort of normal routes of finding it. But there's corroborating evidence that these reports did actually go out. And one of the most sort of telling points was that Silent Sound Inc., which was the company that actually made the technology, on their website right up until about 1996, they advertised the fact that it was used in the first Gulf War, and they proudly sort of provided this technology for the US military. And then all of a sudden in the mid 90s, someone bought the domain name, and again that website just disappeared and just vanished. And
what was it called again, Neil?
Silent Sound Inc., like incorporated.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's the gist of Silent Sound. That's so one technology. I've spoken to quite a few people actually who claim to have worked on it. There's footage that purports to be of it that you can probably find on YouTube at certain times and such. But yeah, it certainly existed. I mean, they've done recent testing with very, very similar type putting voices into people's heads. Technology, a company called Raytheon, which is a weapons manufacturer. They decided that the best people to test this on was prisoners. And I think, again, I may have got this wrong, but I believe it was New Scientist magazine. They advertised in that there was an article in it talking about this and talking about how successful it was. And the idea was that this was going to be used as a discipline device, like a sort of non-violent riot control device, in a similar way to sort of like the way that the LRAD, which is a heat pain causing device, would stop a crowd. This would put thoughts in their head that would either confuse them or do something that would make them not want to riot anymore. And it was being tested on prisoners, and I believe this was about 2011, something like that. So this was quite a while ago. During the Waco siege, the FBI actually and the ATF actually just were going to use a device called the Smirnov pattern, which was invented by a Russian scientist called Igor Smirnov, and it works along similar lines. It actually puts voices in people's heads. They disguised. They used background noise, which is the sort of main thing that your ears pick up, and then they disguise messages that are posted underneath it. And even at Waco, they use the sound terror tactics, sounds of rabbits being slaughtered, and I believe it was Guns N' Roses and Metallica blasted at them at incredibly loud volumes and such like that to disorientate and terrify them. But one of the things that was proposed was this Smirnov pattern, and what they did was they actually went as far as getting the actor Charlton Heston to record a series of voice pieces in which he would pretend to be God, and the voice of Charlton Heston as God would be beamed into David Koresh's head and give him messages and instructions to come out peacefully. And they were really going to go with this right up to the point where basically asked manufacturer of the device, Igor Smirnov, to give them a percentage of success rate, and he says about 60%. And he says, well, what's the absolute worst case scenario? And he says, well, in theory, it could send them all mad and they could slit each other's throats. And so they decided that they weren't going to do that, and in the end, they set them on fire.
That is mind-blowing. That is insane. And it makes me wonder, with the high-definition television sets, the satellite, the Wi-Fi, the just enormous amount of electronic information that's blasted at different vibrational frequencies and sounds that we're having a tough time picking up at the conscious level. Maybe that's why people are so docile around the world, if you really think about it, as far as a global scale. And there's no real riots or outbreaks because they've just got everybody, wirelessly lobotomized.
Well, there's a riot frequency. This was tested in places like the on the Tenderloin area of San Francisco. That particular area, because it's a high crime area, so they could disguise their testing. But apparently, according to research people like Jim Keith, they were doing testing on it. And basically, there are ways of putting a distinct emotion into people's heads. This was like the work of Ross Addy that was taken off the back of the Pandora project. Now, the Pandora project was basically, it was a Russian project whereby they were beaming the American embassy, which was in Moscow. They were beaming it with microwaves to sort of inflict damage over a long period of time, essentially cause cancer and that type of thing. And the American government found out about this, and it went as far up as Henry Kissinger. I forget his exact role, but he basically was aware of it. And they decided to, let's not tell the staff. Let's just see what happens. Let's conduct our own research and see what happens. And some of the staff died, including the ambassador. Some of them developed really sort of unpleasant symptoms like hair falling out, bleeding eyes, that type of thing. But they basically conducted their own sort of correlation of the results and took this back to America, and this informed the work of Ross Addy. And basically what Ross Addy was able to do was he was able to figure out that basically there is a distinct pattern that is shared. It's a universal brain pattern for every emotion. So extreme pleasure, extreme hatred, extreme sadness, extreme humor, whatever. All of these emotions have a very distinct brainwave pattern that can be picked up on an EEG machine. And what they discovered was with the use of certain microwaves, what they could do is they could bury these patterns into the microwaves. So, terror, for example. And they could beam this microwave at people's heads with the embedded signal. And the signal would basically be picked up by the brain. The brain would interpret this as an organic brainwave pattern and immediately replicate it. And there would be no way for you to know that this was from an outside source. And there would also be no way for you to resist this. The brain assumes that this is an organic pattern and so responds in kind. And they were able to discover through various experimentation that essentially people cannot resist this. And this was, I believe this was in the 60s. I may have got that wrong, but this was a long time ago that they were able to do this. And the documentation is there.
So now, in today's day and age, those are some of the older technologies. And I even remember reading an article about something in the 40s where it was, I think, Tavistock. They were using this specific type of technology that was similar to what you're talking about also. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. So then you look at the music out there today, the music videos and the media, and I'll bet you they put a lot of that stuff in programming.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fair amount of subliminal messaging. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is subliminal advertising is not illegal in America. I mean, the thing is, subliminals are often dismissed because people bring up the James Vickery test, which is the concept that you drink Coke, eat popcorn, and this whole idea that he put this into individual frames of a film, and it increased sales of popcorn and Coca-Cola at this particular cinema. And then later he disavowed his work and basically turned around and said, yeah, this is all nonsense, I just made it up. I never even actually put the frames in. And so people go, well, there you go, then that's it, subliminals don't work. Well, various tests at Harvard and Yale and other prestigious environments involving, computerized testing and such like that with embedded subliminals have proven that not only do subliminals work, they get picked up by the brain. but that negative subliminals are more effective than positive subliminals. Like that, for example, there was an experiment where people had to go in and do, excuse me, a maths experiment on a computer, like 5 very basic questions, and unbeknownst to them, they were being bombarded with subliminal messages. And some were very positive and some were negative. Now, the positives had possibly a positive but almost no effect on them. They were just messages saying things like handsome, beautiful, virulent, virile, that type of thing. Anything positive. And the other people were bombarded with negative phrases, aged, wretched, diseased, decrepit, anything, just negative phrases, and it was discovered that they took a decidedly longer time to complete this very, very simple task. And that's only one experiment, but essentially it goes to show that the subliminals do actually work in if they're used in the right context. And KFC, McDonald's, numerous different companies, advertising agencies in America have been found to be using subliminals, and probably still do to this day, because they know that they actually work. So it's a very curious thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were subliminals in music videos or in even something as straightforward as like a soap opera or something, perhaps a pro authoritarian or pro patriotic message or something like that. There is that video that flies around, and I have no idea whether it's authentic or not, of the national anthem, I think, being played at it's like the television shut down or something like that, and there's loads of sort of they live style, consume, obey, you are nothing but a consumer type messages that are sort of over the top of it. I don't, or sort of embedded in it. I've no idea if that's a real thing or not, but the point is that if it was done correctly, it would actually have some effect on the viewer.
Also, with subliminal messaging, if you were to say that's a subliminal message, like if it's legal in America but it's not legal in other countries, how would a country classify something as subliminal? Because I guess if you have something come on the screen for a half second and says you're going to be a millionaire, and there's this beautiful blonde behind it, and you're a young lad, you're like, yay, maybe that's a subliminal message.
Well, this is what I was literally just going to say. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you've got somebody that I'll put it this way, okay? You see this is stereotypical, but you see a rapper, okay, that's got a load of machine guns and rapping about a life of crime, and he's also sat on a massive pile of money, and he's got more jewelry than your local sort of Argos shop or whatever, and he's surrounded by beautiful women and such like that. Could that not be argued that would be a subliminal message that essentially is saying that a life of crime could give you these rewards? When you see your prime minister, your president backed by the military is stood behind him or whatever, or he's dressed in military garb or whatever, he's dressed like the guy from Top Gun. Could these not be subliminal messages to say, this is, we're all in it together, we're all doing this, blah, 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 blah. You could even go as far as just signs of power, walking, striding, the way that Bush used to hold his shoulders. Like, there was a joke that went around in England, in all the sort of satirical television shows, stuff like that Bush used to walk like he was holding 2 sheep, one under each arm. Right. And what he's doing is he's spreading. He's trying to make himself big, because important people are big, and they take up a lot of space, and it shows that he's strong. He had not a lot of movement in his shoulders. It shows that he's considered, and that he's saving energy and stuff like that. These are not things that are picked up, but these are things that would be coached in him, because this is the perception and the image that he wants to give off. I mean, for crying out loud, everyone thought he was from Texas, that he was a cowboy. No one thought that he was a rich, idiotic, cocaine addicted Rhode Island boy.
Shapeshifter.
Well, maybe. I couldn't possibly comment, but you know what I mean? Like, could you argue that was a subliminal message? The subliminal message in a lot of music videos is, this girl might go to bed with me. Look at the way that she's talking to me and looking at me and stuff like that. I might watch this video again. Or wow, this girl's cool. This girl's popular. Perhaps if I emulate her, then maybe I can be as popular as her. This certainly seems to be the way to getting on. Look at the way all those people are dancing around her. Like, do you know what I mean? So you could make all of these arguments. It's about projecting an image that people want to attach themselves to. I mean, technically, subliminal would be something under the conscious experience. All of these things, you could make the argument that they're under the conscious experience, because you're not going into it and going, oh, I see what they're doing. Oh, I get it. Particularly if your audience is like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid or whatever, they're going to look at it and go, oh, they're cool. Why are they cool? Brilliant. I'll buy that then. Or whatever. I'll act in that particular way. This is an expression of how somebody my age might show their independence. So I might ape that behavior. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
You could totally make the argument that would be subliminal.
Well, and then see, when I watch TV and the media, I'm fortunate because at 15, I took a really cool course called communications in high school, and the teacher was just amazing. He taught us how to literally read the subliminal programming in media and just talked a lot about the influence and control. And ever since then, I've built upon that. And in the media, at least here in the U.S., when certain events are portrayed, whether you have 33 miners that get saved, or $23 million missing, or 42 people die in a bus accident, or 81 points got scored at that specific ball game at the 666 Kobe Bryant game, etc. There's certain patterns and numbers and correlations, and some people like Zachary Hubbard, he's really good at connecting dots and gematria and certain events. I kind of look at the bigger picture. He's a lot more into detail, but I do see these certain numbers portrayed a lot in media, and also Marvel films. If you watch any of the superhero films, you're going to see the numbers 42 and 23 a lot. So that's all just additional layers of programming, in my opinion, and I wonder how effective they are. If they can control people with Wi-Fi and hi-fi speakers and helicopters, making these heavily trained combatants wanting to just give up and surrender, running around in circles because of mind control stuff going into their head, when people have 4K high-definition television sets and 6 speakers surrounding them, how much are we allowing ourselves to be influenced and put in mind control and kept in this docile state almost?
Oh, well, probably quite a lot, to be quite honest. Just the act of watching television, it tends to knock you into a hypnotic state. There's a lot of sort of misunderstanding about this. Like the concept that a lot of people get is that there's waves that come out of the television, or there's some sort of device within the television that sort of sedates you. Or even that it was the flicker rate, and I believe that the flicker rate accentuated it, but I don't think that the flicker rate is quite what it is, because I'm trained in hypnotherapy, and what you need for hypnosis, you don't need like a rapid eye movement, you just need an eye fixation. And the other thing that's very, very good for knocking people into a trance type state is repetitive learned behavior. Like if you think of something as extreme as, say, a mantra, that a Yong Gong Ringi Kira or whatever, the reason that you do that is to get yourself into a sort of mindless repetitive loop, essentially, because that repetitive action is something that you sort of lock into, and then all of a sudden you get things like time dilation and extreme relaxation and such like that. It's kind of like if you're doing a task, like I spent all afternoon chopping wood, and wow, the time just flew by. That repetitive action combined with the eye fixation, which is why they say, look at my watch, just keep your eyes on my watch, keep your eyes just following the watch, keep following the watch, and you might find your eyes getting slightly scratchy and warm, slightly heavy, and perhaps it'd be more comfortable to close your eyelids and keep them closed, and you'll find that it takes an incredible effort to raise your eyelids. That's how you would put somebody into a hypnotic trance. It's as straightforward as that. Getting to fixate on something like even something like your finger or a point on the ceiling or something like that, and so that's why television is quite good at that, because people they sit down, particularly they're already tired, they've been at work all day or whatever, they slump down in front of the television, they just fixate on the screen, they do this repetitive action, they're probably seeing something that's not too challenging mentally on them, and you can slip into that sort of trance state. Even unbeknownst to you. And this is why advertising is so effective, because basically when you are in a what could be termed a hypnotic state, a trance state, or when your brainwave activity is sufficiently slowed so that it is an alpha state, which is caused by eye fixation and repetitive behavior, then your critical analysis just disappears, because your conscious mind is distracted to the point that your subconscious mind is at the forefront. And your subconscious mind has got literally no filter. It doesn't understand anything except from a perspective of pure logic, and it wants to help you. And so if you know this, you can manipulate people, because if you say to somebody, buy this product, you'll be incredibly successful because other successful people have got it, and it might even get you a really beautiful girl, your subconscious goes, I'm going to buy that because that's going to benefit me. And it's as straightforward as that. That's why a lot of advertising doesn't actually make any sense. It just portrays a positive image. If you think about all the sort of the most famous slogans attached to products, just do it, the best a man can get, the drive of your life, none of these things actually really mean anything. They have an appropriated meaning.
Hey, I got one.
Yeah?
I don't know if you remember this real quick, but juicy fruit, it's gonna move you. Pop it in your mouth. The taste is gonna move you when you pop it in your mouth. I mean, what are they talking about, man? They're talking about sex.
That's fun. Well, yeah, probably. Well, this is the point. It's interpretive. Like, anybody could interpret it. Like, you're absolutely right. I'm not familiar with that because I've seen that said American advert. But yeah,
it's an old 80s commercial, man. It was on all the time, and I don't think most people really picked up on it consciously. But then years later, you look back at it and you're like, oh yeah, juicy fruit, man. That's exactly what they're talking about.
Double your pleasure, double your fun. That's an old Bill Hicks joke.
Hello.
Well, quite, but that's the point. Have numerous levels. But you could also make the argument that I never said that. If you come to that conclusion, that's your own imagination. There's nothing to do with us. It's very disingenuous in its projection, because it is there. But it has that plausible deniability.
And that's what they're so good at in many levels. They can put 5, 6, 7, 8 different subliminal messages in just a few words and pictures and such. Darren Brown, he did some amazing work where I think there was this one scene specifically. I might have brought this up before, but if you haven't had a chance, if those that are listening to this podcast haven't had a chance to listen to our other interview that we did, make sure to go to leakproject.com and look for Neil Sanders, and that's in alphabetical order in the guest section. You can listen to our last interview. It was great. 2 hours of incredible information. I think now we're taking it even to the next level. Darren Brown did that one scene where it was basically in a strip mall type area. And you would have multiple storefronts with the windows, and they'd have their mannequins and the product they're trying to sell. But the way that he set everything up in the background in these storefronts, and then they had an actor pretending to be a homeless person sitting down, and he had no shoes on, and he literally looked homeless. Well, people that were walking past these stores, and then they would see him, they were giving him all sorts of money, and one person ended up giving him his shoes. It really makes you think, if somebody could do that with just a few mannequins and the way that they're dressed up and stuff and a couple actors, what can these guys do at the higher levels?
Well, he did another a series of programs where basically he showed the manipulative power of just phraseology and that type of thing. That was particularly impressive. But he convinced a group of people to rob a money van, and
I didn't see that one.
He showed police tactics that could convince somebody that was completely innocent that they had committed a crime, a murder that had never actually taken place, but this person wound up confessing to the murder. So but again,
that's spooky, man,
isn't it? There's enough coercive nonsense to just get people to just confess this, and then you can go home. And the thing about Darren Brown is, well, I'm sure we mentioned this before, is that he has that element of plausible deniability again, where basically you can just go it's a magic trick. It's not real. You're not supposed to take it seriously. Crikey, did you fall for that? Oh my God! And I suppose you think that woman's been really sawn in half, do you? Well, okay. Do you know what I mean? So there is that element to it, but yeah, certainly subliminal signs are there. It can come out in all sorts of things, like the use of color, the use of different fonts, the use of positions, of angles of cameras and such like that to make people look domineering. All this. One that's always used is this before and after dieting things. You'll notice that in the before shot, they've not got any makeup on and their hair's all scruffy and probably dirty. Right. Well, you don't notice that. That's the point. You just look at it and go, oh, they look terrible in that shot. And the lighting's really bad and dull. And in the after shot, they've got a makeup and, they've had their hair done and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a very, that's quite a basic one, but these are all the sorts of things that they do. You know, like stuff. Do you know how they advertise like steam coming off
Yeah.
food? And it's a tampon with the hot water, with boiling water like soaked into it behind the food, so it looks like steam is appetizingly rising off of it and stuff like that. It's nuts. But you know, again, they're selling a product. They're not trying to be honest.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, look at any of the food that's portrayed in these fast food commercials that usually come out at nighttime when people have the munchies, and oh man, that looks so good. And you go out to you get your burger, and it's like the size of it's a 3-inch patty that looks like something just got picked up off the floor.
Yeah, or it's just it doesn't taste very good. Like, but hey ho, what? Like I have this thing. I keep going back to KFC, and every time I go, that's horrible. It tastes disgusting. I feel like I've been kicked in the stomach, and then you drive past it, like, oh, that smells quite nice. I'll give it another go. And like usually about once every 3 months, and I just go, oh, why the hell did I do that? It's crap. But
they put chemicals literally in foods. It's been proven, and there's a lot of chemicals that these corporations don't even have to label because they can classify them as trade secrets, and they're literally addictive. They get your brain addicted to these certain foods. So even though you're eating it, it doesn't feel good when you're done. It's like you just want to go back for more because of that taste. That's just another mind control
there's all
tactic.
sorts of crap that they can do with food. Like, have you heard of like glutamate, which is it's meat glue. Like,
I have.
They can stick meat bits together, like scraps that they would essentially throw away normally. What you actually do, the meat industry is allowed to glue these together and sell them to you as one piece of steak, and they do not have to label this. Like, there's all sorts of stuff like that, like vanilla flavoring and raspberry flavoring. One of the things that is often used, is quite often used basically to enhance the flavour of raspberry or vanilla drinks and sweets and ice cream and snacks and all sorts of stuff, is beaver's anal gland juice, which is basically, as it would suggest, a juice that is taken out of the anal glands of a beaver. And this is labelled in Europe and in America as a natural flavour additive. And I've made the joke before that it kind of is, in the way that bull semen is a really lavish salad dressing. Like, I don't really fancy it, but oh, boy howdy, is that extravagant.
That's natural.
Well, exactly. This is the point. Orange juice is never ever freshly squeezed. Even if it's in a carton, it's never ever freshly squeezed. Even if it says freshly squeezed on the box, basically it's at least a year old. What they do is they take the oranges, they juice them, and they stick it in vats, and they leave it for about a year, and they add a load of chemicals to sort of preserve it. And when it comes out, it's clear. And it doesn't taste of anything, so they have to add the orange color and the orange flavor to make orange juice taste like orange juice. It's
and
nuts.
You know what's interesting? If you look at the different price points of what organic orange juice costs that's legit versus and there's even organic stuff now that they can manipulate, but if you look at a true, like a local, let's say you live in Texas and there's something from Austin. Austin has some pretty good foods and beverage companies. So let's say you pick up some orange juice there that's legit orange juice. That's going to cost you twice as much as this other stuff that has to go through all these different processes and additives and colorings and just stupid chemistry that doesn't really need to be involved. But because we live in this corporatocracy world, like you mentioned earlier, well, they've always got to get their cut.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's nuts. The level of nonsense, and this is the point. You can use this as a selling point as well. Oh, it's organic. It's blah blah blah. It's this. It's free range. Blah blah. There's an argument of free range chickens, for example. This may not be correct, but I've heard this from a number of sources. I've also heard that there are scenarios where this is not the case, but the free range is not based on the amount of floor space that they've got, but they actually correlate it in some areas on the amount of head space that they've got. So essentially, sometimes free range chickens have as little or sometimes less floor space as battery hens, but they have, they're in a big aircraft hangar. So essentially, they can. But so,
with
that's
no windows.
Yeah, quite. So again, that may not be true anymore, but that would be. But that's an example of how the manipulation of words can be used to make people think that they're doing a really good thing when they're actually not doing a really good thing at all. To be quite honest, like, you know, there's lots of arguments about fair trade, fair trade products, whether this is actually helping or whether this is just creating a monopoly for sort of Western interests to control the mineral or whatever, or agricultural resources of less developed countries. Like, oh yeah, no, come free trade, come fair trade. Like, we'll make sure that you get a decent wage and stuff like that. On the face of it, it sounds very, very nice, but I've heard that essentially it's not particularly fair. You have to go through certain contractual things to get onto this and stuff like that, and it's just a disguised way of not allowing African companies to essentially get the mainstay of this profit, and Western companies under the guise of like, oh, we're helping, like they're not, essentially they're stripping away the profit from the rightful owner.
Right on.
Sorry, Rex, I totally derailed your first question. I'm sure you were going to ask something about the election. My natural sort of hatred for Donald Trump just sort of knackered it totally up. I do apologize.
Hey, I understand totally. Now, I think that's fine because this will be good. We can start here with the debates. And, I look at these guys up at the top levels as, I shouldn't even say the top levels, at the presidential level and the electable level. And it's really hard for me to trust them and put my energy and faith into them. Now, I've been hoodwinked before in the past where I thought somebody was legit and I voted for him and I found out that was a mistake. So it seems like they're always using the same tactics, and they've even been found to use the same speeches around the world. I'm not talking just in America, but England and other places. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay. And then when I see pictures of some of these heavy players in specific mystery school garb or whatever you want to say, and they're all hanging out together. I'm talking international players, not just from the same country here, folks. I think to myself, this is pretty much a scam. And, as far as what went on with the debates, now I think that either way, we're screwed, personally. I mean, both of them kind of have their own agendas, and the people that are backing them have their own agendas. It would be nice if a real person could be in office. My goodness, could you just imagine if at the top levels, at these electable levels, if people that actually cared about other people, the environment, and the economy, but not to the point of pillaging the earth, if there were people involved that had balance and certain structure and order and morals and values, this could be the most amazing planet in the galaxy. But because of all this, I think that psychopaths rule the world.
Well, I don't think that's in their interests. Like, do you know what I mean? There's a group of very, very wealthy people, and they've established their sort of position at the top, and there's a certain amount of vying there. But they don't want that to change, and so they'll dangle some stuff around and whatnot. But they're essentially, they have common goals. They may not always see eye to eye and such like that, but they have a common goal in as much as they wish to maintain the status quo, which, if you look at it, has pretty much been maintained for hundreds of years. Like, if you look at the same sort of channels of wealth and money families and dynasties and such like that, it seems to be pretty much it sorted out. You know what I mean? The banker takes all. But I mean, the American election, it reminds me of that bit in Mad Max, the original Mad Max, at the end, where the guy's given the choice between hacksawing his own leg off or dying in a fiery explosion. So it's like, I mean, I'll give you another point.
Classic.
Right? Like, in England, Trump is a slang phrase, or a sort of childish slang phrase, for breaking wind or farting. So you could essentially say that in England, Trump means a load of hot air and a loud noise from an anus that is often full of shit. And Clinton's is a card manufacturer. They basically, they make birthday cards and different types of cards. So, you could suggest that Clinton's is a purveyor of false platitudes. So, you're knackered either way. It's not a very good selection. But again, it gives you an idea that this concept, anybody can be president. Really, that's not borne out by the statistical analysis, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't quite understand why. Well, I kind of do, but I don't buy into this idea of Trump being anti-establishment. He's the establishment. He's a billionaire allegedly. You can't be a billionaire Like, oh, he's the altruistic businessman, is he? Oh, good, we found one. Oh, thank Christ for that, because I was starting to get really, really worried. I don't buy it. I think it's self-serving. I think it's narcissistic, his pursuit. I just don't buy it. I just don't think he's got any decent policies. I don't buy anything that Hillary Clinton's got to say either. Luckily, I'm in the position where I don't have to give two hoots about it, because it's not really going to affect me in as much as I don't have to vote for it and I don't have to live under it. But I think it's a rum deal. Like, it's like going to a restaurant and finding that essentially you got 2 plates of shit on offer and that's it. Like, personally, I'd walk out of that restaurant. I don't know what. Well, yeah, and try and make it so that restaurant didn't affect me, so that I didn't actually need to be so reliant on the restaurant. There's a lot of people sometimes say to me, what solutions have you got and stuff like that. And I appreciate that there's a lot of difficulties by the society and stuff like that, but you've got to sort of look at it. It's like, what is it that they're stopping you from doing? What is it you want to do that they're stopping you from doing? Well, do it. Make that would be my response. Is make it your effort to do it. If you're concerned about your heritage being lost or whatever, then write a book about heritage. Okay, start a discussion group. Make people interested in it. Okay, don't start hating outwardly because other people aren't interested in it. Okay, you've got to like that, because that's the oldest trick in the book. I'm going to take something from you and I'm going to say that someone else took it from you, and get you two fighting, so that nobody's going, hang on, these wealthy people are just living it up, and I'm fighting this tiny group, and we're not getting on, and they're not getting on, and nobody's getting advanced anywhere, and we're being promised all these things, and nothing comes of it.
You're absolutely right about all the false promises, and they offer you the world and then do the opposite oftentimes, and some of these politicians do. Now, what is it like in England as far as the political landscape? Is there more trust in the government out there? Do you feel that it's less corrupt?
No. No, not at all. It's completely corrupt. We've got a paedophile scandal that's being, brushed under the rug, where essentially knights of the realm and MPs and members of prominent political groups like Sinn Féin and the British National Party, which is a sort of right-wing racist organisation, and various MI5 spies and stuff, got caught up in a child sex scandal in a brothel in London called Elm House, and MI5 have been caught taking children out of care homes and using them to try and ensnare public officials in honey trap operations. One of the most sort of popular entertainers of British history, who was intimately connected with the royal family and the British government, and dined with prime ministers and Christmas with prime ministers and such, was revealed to be a monstrous paedophile of dozens and dozens of years. This is Jimmy Savile. So no, there's not trust in the government. At the minute, we've essentially got, we've got a 3-party system. We've got more than that party system. There's really only 2 relevant parties that are ever going to get into power. We've got the left wing, which is Labour, and we've got the right wing, which is Conservative. Conservative is currently in government, and we've got a very strange situation where the Labour Party was left without a leader, and there's been various people campaigning to become its leader, and the publicly popular person is a gentleman called Jeremy Corbyn, who is very liberal, very seemingly anti-establishment, very to the not sort of the problem is using these terms in America. Very to the left means communist. He's very to the left in as much as we've had a very centre-left government, and he is more liberal left. And what's very, very strange is that the government is, or the Labour Party itself is doing everything that they can to make this person not become the leader of the Labour Party, because they just don't feel, or they say that they don't actually feel that he's electable, blah, 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 etc., 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 which is bizarre, because this person, Jeremy Corbyn, is getting the most enormous response from grassroots public people that any politician has got since Blair hoodwinked the nation all the way back in the 90s. Literally thousands of people are turning up to hear this, to see this person, hear this speak, because they feel that he is actually representative of the of more normal people. And what is very, very bizarre is the outright, and I'm sure he's not perfect, and I'm not saying that I'm a huge fan of him, because I tend to just not care about all this stuff. But the point is that it's very strange that the establishment, so to speak, even within the party, is it's almost like a sort of Bernie Sanders type of thing. Do you know what I mean? Where basically it doesn't matter what the popular sort of opinion seemed to be, the overriding party didn't want that person being a representative of them. Now, and obviously in America, for whatever reason, he did not get put forward to be the nominated candidate. But in England at the minute, Jeremy Corbyn, I believe, is the elected leader of the Labour Party. So that may change, because they keep trying sort of coups against him and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's just strange. Like, there seems to be an incredible juxtaposition between what the actual general public seem to want, and what the even the Labour Party itself, which is supposed to be a representative of the people's electoral views or whatever, it seems to actually want to achieve.
And this is going to be a little bit off topic, but at the same time it is on topic, because I think that if it's not legit, it's more of a mind control type tactic or some type of weird spin. Now, the reptilian agenda, whether you believe in it or not, I don't know if I heard anything about it prior to David Icke coming out with his book, The Biggest Secret, that I read. And by the way, it's an incredible book. At the time, it literally just blew my mind. So many things. It seems like he was able to connect every single dot to the point of it being, everything is 6 degrees of separation, essentially. But at the same time, after years of research after that and really digesting things, I just question more now than I ever have before. And was there any type of talk of reptilian shapeshifters or anything like that before those works came out? I mean, how far back can you go and remember when it first started coming up?
I don't know. I'm quite young, Like, the first time I heard about it was David Icke, obviously. I've seen a couple of videos and stuff. Like, there's a Chris Everard thing where he says there's reports of people with reptile heads in some sort of old newspaper or something. I don't know if that's true or not. I've got no idea, to be quite honest. Honestly, I've got no idea about reptiles or anything. UFOs is not really my forte. I did meet Travis Walton the other day by a strange coincidence. He was speaking at a conference, and I thought that'd be nice, go and see him. And I'll be honest, his story seems pretty, he seemed pretty genuine to me. Like, he was very matter of fact about stuff and whatnot. Who can say?
I was trying to find the news article while we were talking here where Princess Diana referred to her family members as lizards or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's any validity to that.
Well, I think that's what she said. I mean, I don't know in what context that was meant, whether it was meant that they were particularly slippery and slimy people, or whether she meant that they were literally lizards. And I think most people would probably lean towards the former, that she meant it in a figurative sense rather than a literal sense. But I haven't actually read the letters outside of, I've read The Biggest Secret and a couple of other David Icke books and stuff like that. But that I really don't know, to be quite honest.
When you read that book, did it just scare did it kind of freak you out?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, of course. The concept. I mean, again, I don't know if I've ever taken it 100% seriously, but the idea. I mean, what struck me when I first read it was like, this is V, surely, like the TV series V. I don't know, whether that has any bearing on it, but he makes a fairly interesting argument with this sort of concept of sort of snake worship and stuff like that throughout the ages and stuff like that. I don't know. I put a pin in that one. It's a possibility, I suppose. Lots of things are a possibility. I wouldn't bet my house on it.
Right. Certainly open to the possibility, but at the same time agnostic, and I can appreciate that. I'm the same way.
I know a lot of people take UFOs incredibly seriously. I don't wish to denigrate that at all, but it's not my particular field. It's not my particular forte. I've got friends that are in, like Richard Hall and Gary Hasseltine and Andrew Johnson and Ben Emily Jones. They're brilliant and at looking at UFO stuff, and there's also other people that I don't really know. They're great, but I tend to look at UFOs as a kind of like it's not my field of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. So I would view UFOs in a kind of like fan type way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to watch UFO videos and stuff and go, that's cool. Yeah, I like the idea. Blah 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 blah. But it's not really me. It's not my particular interest.
Absolutely. I certainly appreciate that. It's amazing the possibilities. I mean, that's one of the things I like about the Leak Project, Neil, is we interview people from all around the world on a wide variety of topics and genres and get their information. And as a listener of Leak Project, I would recommend just taking everything with a grain of salt, obviously. And if it resonates with you, awesome. If you can pick up a few gems here and there. Now, what we're talking about as far as the mind control tactics and the certain practical applications, this is stuff that's science and can be documented. You can read the white papers, see the patents. I didn't mean to do a pattern interrupt here or divert, divert the attention. I just wanted to bring that up because I often wonder, this is where I wanted to segue that question, is maybe sometimes because I've talked to some people that I genuinely feel there's been some weird stuff that's happened in their life, and maybe if they were a part of an MK Ultra type program, the programming itself, the person that continually hypnotized them in very nefarious fashions and did specific things to their brain, maybe they put certain triggers in their mind. Like you talked about earlier, how Darren Brown could convince somebody of something, or certain police tactics can convince somebody of something that they didn't do. Well, maybe if you put these subliminal messages or programs into people that say, oh yeah, I traveled to Mars and I was an intergalactic pilot and I was also a part of an MK Ultra program where they did testing on me and tortured me to do these things. Well, maybe half of that's true, but that second part they put in there to just completely make it look like that person is crazy or not telling the truth or something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can. There is a device called the God Helmet, which can create such scenarios. It can create the experience of being abducted by aliens, or the experience of meeting God, or meeting demons or angels, or that sort of thing. And it was what was his name? Michael Persinger of Laurentian University invented it. Like I don't understand exactly how it works, but it has solenoids that basically go around the brain. It's like a motorcycle helmet, and it induces hallucinations, but sort of full body auditory and sensory hallucinations. To the point where people believe that they're transported to other realms. I suppose it's not dissimilar to a kind of DMT trip or something like that. But various sort of like journalists and reporters and scientists have tried this thing, and the people have experienced things like, say, meeting God, meeting angels, meeting aliens, being abducted by aliens, becoming like a monk and like becoming another person and being in sort of a time travel scenario or whatever, almost dropping into what would seemingly be another life or whatever, and many things like that. Apparently, like up to 80% of people experienced sort of the presence of some other being or some sort of greater being whilst under the influence of this device. So it would not be beyond belief to assume that this could be sort of like strapped to somebody, and in that sort of scenario, basically.
Hey, no problem at all on the dog. It's totally cool.
Oh, it's all right. He's just come up behind me now. Like, he's been a little sod. Like, I don't know what's up with him. I think he wants attention. Well, he wants food. Like, and he's had his dinner, so he just wants attention. Sorry. I thought he was wanting to go out the back door, but he's all right. He seems to have come behind me and settled now.
Cool. He's mellowing out a little bit. What kind of dog you got?
I've got a beagle.
Oh yeah. They're pretty fun to deal with. They're not too hectic.
No, he's lovely. He's a spoiled little sod because we've spoiled him. But that's why we got him. Do you know what I mean? He's not a working dog or anything like that. We just wanted to spoil him.
That's cool.
So yeah, but he's like a little Maharaja. He's a right little sod.
Nice.
He seems all right now.
Good deal.
Sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. Maybe just a couple more things we could talk about before we close out tonight. And
I'm absolutely fine. So we can do the rest of another half hour.
Well, I was actually kind of thinking too, before we get into the body language and stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about since you're in England and you know what people think about us here in America and other places of the world. One of the things that I find fascinating in global culture is the gun control debate.
Okay.
Whether you believe in them or not, and people definitely have their opinions, and I appreciate people's opinions. I mean, if we all thought the same, would be like the Borg and then plug us in, we're a part of the same network. That doesn't sound fun to me at all. Although balance is key, and I think working together is key oftentimes. So when you look at the culture in America, there's so many guns in America that if our military was completely dismantled or taken over, the people in America would be able to defend themselves, at least with hand-to-hand type combat or people coming in getting dropped off. Now, if you look at countries like where you live in England and Australia, it's virtually impossible to have a gun in England. And a lot of the media kind of portrays what people think in England of Americans as, oh, those SUV beer drinking, gun toting cowboys, all they want to go do is buy an AK-47 and shoot a bunch of target practice and go hide out in a bunker and chew some tobacco. That's kind of the media portray of what people think of Americans that have guns. So what do you feel about that? And what do most people out there feel about the gun culture in America?
Cool. Okay. Right. Well, first thing is, I used to be part of a gun club, so I understand the pleasure of owning guns and the concept of responsible gun ownership.
They have those in England? You can own a gun?
They used to have them, and then there was the Dunblane shooting, and owning handguns became illegal. You can still get shotguns if you have a license, but you have to have some sort of reason for it, like certain hunting, like for certain birds and things like that. If you're a farmer, there are ways that you can get a shotgun license. It's not particularly common, but there are. But the concept that there's absolutely no guns in England is not true, because the police are getting progressively more armed. And there's guns in England, in sort of criminal guns and such like that. It's for one, I live in Nottingham, and at one time Nottingham was nicknamed Shottingham, because basically, it's nothing in comparison to the US. I think we had something like 3 or 4 shootings, like fatal shootings, or perhaps not even all of them were shootings in like 1 year, which was considered an awful lot. But this was a while ago. So but there are incidents of gun crime in major cities in England. So the concept that there are literally no guns is not quite true. Now, it's interesting what you're saying about the idea that if the military take over, blah blah blah, blah, you could defend yourself and stuff, such like that. Do you think that's actually true? Because
I've put a lot of thought into that. Let me jump in real quick. The first time I heard that, I thought to myself, there's no way, because another military could just come on over and drop a couple nukes and then people are going to be done. Yet at the same time, if the people, if everybody knows how to shoot a gun in America and do it properly with safety measures, and if they own a firearm, and if a foreign, let's say, I'm just going to use this as an example. This is all hypothetical, but let's say China comes in with 1 million military personnel and drops them off on the coast, and they're all armed. Well, I think that you're going to have a much better chance defending yourself with a firearm than with a knife and bow and arrow. Now,
I agree, but my counter argument to that would be, and it's from a position of complete ignorance, so it is literally just devil's advocate. Surely the guns were freely available in Iraq, and the Iraqi army, for example, they had quite a lot of guns, not only guns but missiles and such like that. That didn't help them against the superior might of the American military. So when you're fighting against drones and planes and that sort of thing, is your AR-15 really going to be substantial enough to do that? So my question would be, is that a valid argument? And I don't know the answer.
If you look at it as a point of it's just guns against drones, or it's just guns against this mind control technology that can literally make everybody give up their guns without even shooting a single bullet, I can certainly appreciate that. And at the same time, if you have offsetting factions that can keep those at bay, you're going to have a much better chance defending yourself with firearms. So if everybody gave up their firearms, yet that technology still existed here, let's say an EMP went off, or somebody used some type of technology to get rid of that technology, then people are going to be left with their guns and their other forms of defense, whether it be a baseball bat, a shovel, or whatever. So it really, I think, just depends on how you look at it. Any additional form of protection, as long as it's used properly and effective, I can see as a beneficial manner. And at the same time, if there's if it's just going to be lasers versus a shotgun, there's really not much of a chance there.
Well, the attitude in England generally is that, isn't that quite a fatalistic attitude that you're taking, that you require these defense mechanisms, for the sake of a really terrible incident, be that home protection or whatever. And I'll reiterate, I have no problem with gun ownership at all. I don't have a problem with it. I really don't have a problem with it. However, I think the attitude seems strange in England in general, that there is so many deaths from guns, not just school shootings, but sort of accidental deaths and that sort of thing, and suicides and such like that. And it's just such a different culture that the one thing that I don't think we kind of get in England is that this. I don't think anyone would suggest banning guns. Well, I think a lot of people would suggest banning guns. I'm of the opinion that I don't think that's realistic, aside from anything else, and I don't think that's necessary. But I think it would be naive to suggest that America doesn't have a problem with gun-related deaths. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to give up all your guns, but like I think the rest of the world, particularly from an English standpoint, is looking at it, and perhaps from a perspective of complete ignorance, but saying, why are you so resistant to, say, background checks? And I understand this concept of like it's a creeping step. Do you know what I mean? One day they stop this, and then the next day they stop this. But at some point, do you not have to wait up and go, perhaps people who are on a terrorist watch list should not be allowed to get guns? Or perhaps people, I understand that it's a very, very hot topic, and that there's probably some people listening to me going, you don't understand, you commie, blah, blah, blah. You're absolutely, you know what, I don't understand. Like that, and I think that is the perspective that comes across in England, certainly, that we don't have the correct understanding to make a coherent argument with you. There are the arguments that I could make for gun control, like, or an element of gun control, like, is it really going to actually do that, and look at the amount of deaths and stuff like that. And I would reiterate again that I'm not personally for gun control. I think there's nothing wrong with responsible gun ownership at all. Nothing wrong with it at all.
Let me just interject real quick if I can. Sorry, I was just going to say, when you brought up a minute ago, you think that maybe some people are going to make those comments about you being a communist or whatever. I mean, there's going to be a few troll comments I can already know, but as far as the way that you're presenting this, I mean, I certainly appreciate your opinion and see what you're saying, and I think that is kind of the main thought process of what people think in England and other places about that loophole that you're talking about, where anybody can just go pick up a gun and there doesn't even have to be a background check if you go to a gun show. With that said, it is a lot more difficult than people think to just go to a gun show and get a gun without a background check. And if you actually look at these shootings that are portrayed in the media, especially, there is a lot of data that points to those are actually orchestrated events. And the ones that really do happen, we don't hear about that often. I mean, if there's a genuine shooting where some psychopath goes to a school and kills somebody, there might be a little bit of media coverage on it, but it seems like those aren't the ones that are touched on very much. It's usually these big psyop campaigns.
Well, you may well be correct, but since 9/11, there's been over 200 school shootings in America. That's a lot. That's an awful lot. Again, that doesn't mean that I'm saying you should all give up your guns, but this is something that needs to be addressed. This is something that doesn't happen in anywhere else in the world in the regularity that happens in America. And you may well be correct. This may be some sort of orchestrated thing. I think that a lot of the sort of, the inner city shootings and stuff like that, which taints the respectable gun ownership, I think absolutely that is orchestrated and exacerbated by the conditions that are created by the government. They want inner city poor people to kill each other, because it's a way of gentrifying certain areas, and it's a way of slowly reducing it does a number of things. It gets people in prison, so that they're essentially slave labor. It kills off a lot of what could be described as useless eaters by complete, elitist swines, and it also reduces the price of neighborhoods, so that they can then mysteriously a few years later become very, very profitable for a select group of people. So I get that. It's just it's very alien. It's very alien to somebody in England, because we don't have guns. Do you know what I mean? So
sure. Sure, and I appreciate that.
But again, I appreciate that. I don't think there's anything wrong with responsible gun ownership, but there has to come a point where people go, all right, come on, let's look at this. Like, there certainly is, there seems to be a problem. What's the cause of that? That might not be guns, right? Okay, it might be attitudes. It might be education. It might be lack of education around the way to handle guns. It might be anything. But I think what's really sort of strange to particularly people within England is what is perceived as a lack of any intention to even engage in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. And you know what's interesting is there's so many different laws out there about guns right now and so much gun control. And if you look at those 200 shootings, out of those 200 school shootings, if fully verifiable, let's say that you can 100% prove that those 200 are verifiable, I wonder how many of those the person that actually did the shootings picked up a gun with that loophole. That's one thing that you never hear about.
I think in the majority of these shootings, there were guns that were taken from family members. There were legally owned guns that were taken, from family members. Again, that really doesn't have a bearing on gun ownership, but it is a variable that needs to be looked at, basically. So
we're going to ruffle some feathers with this conversation.
Hey, again, I don't really have the contextual analysis to make it. And I'm going to keep reiterating, I've got no problem with gun ownership. I don't think that gun control. I don't. If nobody in America wants it, which clearly a lot of people don't, then I don't see why you should have it. And what's interesting though is every time there is like a high precedent school shooting, like Sandy Hook, Columbine, or Virginia Tech, or whatever, there's always this clamoring that basically people are going to take away guns or reduce the gun ownership and such like that. And again, I may be wrong about this, but as far as I can see, after each of these tragedies where it is purported in the media that this is going to be the end of gun ownership in America, what actually happens is gun sales go through the roof. And again, it very much depends on your perspective. There is an argument that all these things are created in order to give the pretext to remove guns from people. And again, I just don't see as that's. I don't think it's legitimately viable. I don't think you could physically do it, and I don't think any politician in America would be stupid enough to go that far. Again, I may be wrong, and a lot of people would be listening and going, if you lived in America, you would understand that is a very real threat. You may well be right. Again, I may be speaking from a complete position of ignorance. But there is another argument that essentially this paranoia of guns being taken away from you is being stoked, either for a very sort of quite basic concept, like just so that the gun salesmen make more money, so an economic reason, or for the concept that literally tied into what we're saying, the idea that the more guns are in circulation, the more guns get into the wrong hands, and the more incidents happen that taint responsible gun owners, that present this image of chaos and also create this chaos. So it could be multifaceted. This is the thing. It might not be as straightforward as that, or it could be a long play to take your guns away once everybody gets to the point where it goes, well, there's far too many people killing him. I would reiterate it though. Again, I don't think it's viable. I don't think you could physically take away everybody's guns in America. I don't see how it would happen. I think there's far too many, and I think the opposition to it is far too great.
Right. And one thing that I want to add to this, and just a couple things, and we'll move on, because I think that we've pretty much hit the points that we need to with this. But as far as what you just said about being able to take everybody's guns, that's another thing that I feel is probably really important to think about, because even if everybody that's a law-abiding citizen gives up their guns, then all the criminals are going to have them. And there's so many, that are out there that's when it could really be a bad idea, because the law enforcement has so much stuff they got to deal with anyway. If somebody's breaking into your house that has a gun and they're a criminal and you don't have a way to defend yourself except for with a baseball bat or throwing a dish at them or something like that, or a hammer, well, that obviously gives the criminal element a much better chance to really kind of mess with society and take a lot more from a contributing family. So I think that those are some things that are probably even more important to think about than the Chinese or the North Koreans coming in and taking us over.
I appreciate that point, and this is another thing that people often don't take into concept, is that basically because of the culture in America, because of the entrenchment of the use of guns, there are so many that it would not perhaps be in England. When the handgun ban came into play, it wasn't a huge amount of people that had it, represented to the size of the population. It was conceivable because essentially it was all sports shooting and that type of thing, like homeland enthusiasts, hobbyists, perhaps people that would perhaps go on to sort of Olympic level of that sort of thing. But it wasn't home protection. It wasn't. It certainly wasn't used for that type of thing, which it is in America. And so this is an important point that you make. That basically, this context makes a lot of my arguments null and void, because essentially I don't live in that scenario, so I can't get a fully rounded understanding of the scenario that you live in, and I fully agree with that. One counterpoint that I would say to that is that there are criminal elements that have guns in England. It's not uncommon. A couple of phone calls probably get get somebody that could get your gun. Certainly in my youth, I would be able to get hold of something nasty like that. So it's not impossible in England, if you know the right dodgy characters and such. But another point that I would also add to that is it is a commonly held belief, and it would be impossible. Some of it comes from Eastern Bloc Europe and stuff like that. But the suggestion is that essentially in England, like in America, trouble surrounding firearms is allowed to be sort of exacerbated by the police. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, probably not to your listeners actually, but it was very strange the way that all of a sudden a lot of guns came into, say, areas like London and such like that, and the police sort of just didn't seem to sort of catch on to it till later and such like that, because it gives certain areas a bad name, it gives certain minority groups a bad name. Like, you could even make the argument that, again, it gives the concept of gun ownership or guns themselves a bad reputation, and that can be exploited if you were to come from that perspective. So yeah, it's a very, very strange and multifaceted issue, to be quite honest. Like, again, I'll just finish by reiterating, I don't personally believe in gun control. I think there's nothing wrong with responsible gun ownership, and that's it. But there is something strange in America whereby more people get killed by guns than in other countries proportional to the amount of gun ownership. Who knows what that cause is?
Psychotropic drugs is most likely one of the culprits, because every false, or I shouldn't say false flag.
Yeah, this is an
but they're always
interesting point.
connected.
They're all on SSRIs, aren't they, or under psychiatric care of some description and such like that. Or there seems to be certainly a correlation, like, with that, whether that's a definitive connection, but it seems to be certainly a pattern, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But again, what does that do? It taints the image of responsible gun owners. I'm sure there's hundreds of people that basically, like, this is the point. I'm sure statistically you could prove to me that more guns don't do harm than do harm, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
All I can speak on is the perspective that I come from thousands of miles away, and our very ignorant observation of a situation from an exterior point.
Sure. Well, I think that you're a lot less ignorant than you say you are in regards to that. You seem to know more than that, and I appreciate the information. You're very, you're honest, and I put you on the spot. But I'm just aware it's a touchy subject, and I don't want people to think that I'm having a go at them or anything like that, because that's not it. But right. There is a problem with it. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to get rid of all guns. In fact, I don't think it does. But it certainly needs a little bit of a conversation. And I think the problem is that basically both sides, the anti-gun and the pro-gun lobby, rabble rouse, and I think it's one of these situations where you basically get an argument rather than a discussion. Exactly, and that's the thing. I mean, this is just correlating with what we've been talking about throughout this whole presentation. You've got the divide and conquer. You've got two polar opposites, and instead of finding balance somewhere in between, you've got these fanatics on both sides that have their agendas and won't listen to anything else. And if you don't agree with them, then you're for the devil, and that's not always the case.
No, it's not always the case, absolutely. But what that thing that you're describing, that sort of like connection to a group, it's incredibly psychologically rewarding and comforting to know that you're part of a larger group that all thinks the same way, that all has similar views or whatever. It's like being in the toughest gang in town. And so people. What I'm saying is that people can be manipulated into perhaps more extreme views by the inclusion of by the carrot of inclusion into a broader group that gives them more psychological esteem, shall we say. And that can work in really good ways. Do you know what I mean? That can work by basically people joining, say, charitable organizations or organizations of learning, where basically they want to be respected by their peers. And it can also work in really negative ways, where essentially people form like race hate groups or that sort of thing, because it's a way of feeling superior. But the point is that that mechanism can be used, and it can be used by lobbyist groups, it can be used by advertisers. So it could be used for, say, pro-gun people, anti-gun people. It could be used by politicians. It could be used very heavily by politicians to drag you into a group. It's very, again, the election in America is bizarre to people watching in England, because it doesn't seem to be really. It seems to be more a popularity contest than a political sort of debate. And again, of course, it's always kind of like that, but it's sort of very exaggerated and very show busy in America in comparison to sort of like, you know, England, basically. So it's quite strange watching it. And all it seems to be from my limited view of it is slinging insults at one another, rather than saying, really, they seem to focus more on that than actually sort of saying, look, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it. There's a lot of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And by the way, did I say that he's this? And do you know what I mean? It's very different to the way that politics is presented in England. I'm not saying that it's any worse or better, but it's just, you know, interesting from an English perspective. We're quite reserved, you see.
When I see the parliament, I mean, I've seen clips before where it seems like the political landscape in England, you've got a whole bunch of people in one room kind of yelling at each other and going at it.
Yeah, and yeah, they do. This is parliamentary questions. Essentially, like, you know, one person will stand up and put a question to either the prime minister or start a debate or whatever. And there's a lot of shouting, and there's a lot of putting each other down in insults. It's almost like, at times, it's like
Food
the most
fight.
incredibly. It's more akin to the most boring battle rap that you've ever seen in your entire life. But sometimes it is quite witty. There's sort of retorts and responses and such like that. They having that, but it's all for the. It's for the tourists. It's nonsense. Like, they all go to the same drinking den in the depths of Parliament afterwards, right? Okay, they all use the same rent boys, okay, and they all get covered up by the same whips, right? And in England, right, we have two sets of people, right? Okay, we have parliamentarians, right, which are attached to political parties, and we have civil servants, and we have things like under secretaries and things like that, which are very high up in the civil service. Now, regardless of depending on which party is in power, they each have like whips, and what whips are there to do is to basically, like, I mean, this is euphemized, but essentially they're there to like mop up scandals. And for example, Tom Fortescue, who's the old Tory whip, is on film saying that one of his jobs was basically, if someone came to me and said that they got into trouble, you know, having sex with young boys or whatever, it was my job to make sure that didn't get into the newspapers. And so you have this parliamentary sort of mechanism that's designed to sort of like stop scandal, which makes it very strange when scandals do come out, because it begs the question, was this meant to come out? Is this part of a broader plot? And then what you have is the civil service. Now, the civil service is essentially, again, the mechanism and the administrative facility that runs the country. And they have heads of departments, and they have people that advise politicians and advise prime ministers as to the workings and how they can best facilitate policy and that sort of thing. Now, these people are constant. They're all knighted. They all have awards that go beyond knighthoods. They're part of the establishment, and they don't change, regardless of who the prime minister is. The undersecretary is usually the same person. There is, again, this is why Parliament doesn't and the country doesn't grind to a halt on election night, because there are people with their hand on the tiller, and it just begs a lot of questions about what politicians actually do. Because if you think about it, they arrive in a job or a department or whatever. I don't know if this is exactly the same in America, but they arrive in a department. You're now Minister of Health, right? Okay. I've got no idea what that involves. How would you possibly know? So you've got to run that job, have you, well, by the time that you've actually sort of like figured out what it is that you're even supposed to do, it might be a reshuffle, it might be a re-election, you might be, have been sacked. Who knows what's going to happen? And so they bounce around. These people are not qualified. Like the current Chancellor of the Exchequer is not a very good economist. He's not qualified to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's there because he's the mate of the Prime Minister or the mate of the former Prime Minister, for example. Like, it's a boys' club. It's a big old boys' club. This is the point. Like, okay, it's like, so the issues like perhaps things like gun control and stuff like that, what benefits the boys' club? Like, and I think what at the minute benefits the boys' club is not taking people's guns, but making people think that they're going to take people's guns for whatever reason. And I don't know exactly what that is, but I know that they're devious swines. So, you know.
Well, I do
keep your
know
eyes
that.
open.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say I do know that the amount of guns that have been sold under the Obama administration are through the roof. So, you know, what you're hitting on does make a lot of sense. Freak people out, and then, man, I'm going to go pick up as much as I can before, you know, I know somebody, this is kind of funny. I'm just going to divert here a little bit, but I've got a friend that used to be a vice president for a specific branch of the Federal Reserve in Texas, and real nice guy, and he knew many years ago that mini-thins were going to become outlawed. So he bought as many bottles as he could because, well, essentially, if you've ever had a real mini-thin, back in the day, kids would take like 15 or 20 of them at a time and it'd make it feel like their hair was growing faster, essentially. But if you took one or two, you know, it's just like drinking a couple cups of caffeine. But anyway, so it became illegal, and he went out and picked up as many of these bottles as he could. So where am I going with this? If somebody thinks something's going to become illegal and they have an attachment to it, they're probably going to go out and get more of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and again, this is what you've seen up until this point. That doesn't negate anyone else's argument. It just means that is what has happened up to this point, regardless of the furore and the lobbying and blah blah blah. And there's no doubt that it's getting stronger. You can't doubt that at all. I mean, certainly from what I see in the English media, it seems to be getting stronger, the sort of like anti-gun lobby in America. But regardless of that, what's actually happened is a steady increase in gun sales. So, you know, take from that what you will. I don't have the answers, like, to be quite honest. And again, I'm not probably that qualified to speak on it. Strange, very strange. I mean, again, I agree with you. Like, for example, the incidents in England and the incidents in Australia, where that led to gun confiscation, or it wasn't really. It never really got to the point where people were having guns confiscated. It was like a door-to-door thing. There was like an amnesty, and people tended to sort of give them up, to be quite honest, because they didn't really have a choice. But the incidents, you know, involving Dunblane and Thomas Hamilton and the Martin Bryan in Australia, they smack of mind control. They smack of connections to other nefarious intelligence operations, like for example in England, the Dunblane shooting. The children that were killed seemed, or there's a certain amount of evidence to suggest that they were part of a paedophile ring, and were essentially silenced witnesses for. I know that sounds very strange because they were children, but this is essentially the concept. And so I don't doubt that there was efforts in order to make this happen in England, and I understand people's sort of fears in America, but I just, again, from a logistic point of view, I don't think it's possible. And so there is a possibility that some of these fears are perhaps a bit overstated. And I'll take that further and suggest that perhaps the fact that these fears are overstated is because they've been stoked by people that have an ulterior motive. What exactly that is, I don't know.
Absolutely, and certainly appreciate you, sharing your side of the story with us and talking to us about how a lot of other people feel out there that That's much appreciated. Now, also, I guess maybe in closing out tonight, we could talk a little bit about body language and key cues that emit what somebody might be thinking, ways to spot a liar, eye movements, connecting to thoughts, etc.
Right. Now, I mean, there are certain things that, for example, you could do to sort of convey power or whatever. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Put your arms out, like puff your chest out, eyes up, look people directly in the eye. he can wear certain colours and certain clothes that indicate power. For example, if you're wearing a Rolex, I know this is again very glib and very thing, but if you're wearing a Rolex and you've pulled up in a brand new Mercedes, it looks far more impressive than if you've just strolled up on your skateboard, doesn't it? Like, you know, I know that's superficial, but it's a fact.
Dang it.
I know this is where I keep falling down, but yeah, there are ways that you can communicate power through body language. I mean, the thing is, right? Okay, I think it was called Lie to Me or something like that. It was I think Tim Roth, wasn't it? And he's talking about micro sort of like movements and stuff like this that give someone away if they're lying and such like that. And there are certain what could be known as tells. Hunching your shoulders, you cover your, like lift the heels of your feet, touch your nose, arms across the body, reassurance gestures, like taking a step backwards, that kind of thing, touching your neck. These could possibly be indications of lying, but what they usually are, the problem is, again, it's not as straightforward as if you do this, you are definitely lying, because it's to do with context. It's to do with what that statement has brought up within that person and the anxieties that it projects in that person. So if you ask this person a question, did you sleep with that girl, and you touch your nose, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're lying. It means that question has caused you some sort of anxiety that it is more normal than if you were asked sort of a completely, random question. Now, that could be that, yes, you slept with that girl. That's why you don't want to answer that question. That's why it's troubling to you. It could be something like, no, I didn't. But for a second, I thought about it, and that caused me some anxiety because I felt so bad because I love you so dearly. It very much depends on the person, their interaction with the other person, and the context of this relationship. And this is really important because I've seen this happen, right? We have a really crap television show in England called the Jeremy Kyle Show, and it's like a sort of Jerry Springer ripoff, but it's even more base and tacky and nasty, and there's even less teeth on show. It's depressing beyond belief. And for a time they had this lie detector expert, and he would basically do this. He would ask someone a question, and any physical response that he would see, be that an eye movement or blah blah blah, a twitch, etc., he would immediately say you're lying and condemn this person, and that's it, their relationship over. And I sat there watching this loads of times and watching people like break down after, say, I didn't lie, I didn't sleep with a girl, blah 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 blah. And either they're brilliant actors or this psychologist was a bit crap because he hadn't put the idea of context into play, and that is the problem with lying behavior. I mean, there are certain things that, again, you could be saying that could betray lying. Stumbling over words is one thing. Changing the subject and that sort of thing, and again, there are physical responses, but the problem is that it is very difficult to say. As to say lie detector machines or whatever, I don't know whether they work, to be quite honest. I think with a skilled practitioner they can be really useful. I think again there's the danger for misinterpretation, basically, but it's one of these things where basically you can learn to be a good liar. Being a good liar is or reading lying in people is dependent on that person. Because, for example, a sociopath or a psychopath or a total git, like, they won't react to lying. They're good liars because they don't care. Bad liars are people that care about getting caught, and so betray themselves. If you're a total I don't care, a total sociopath, you can lie quite effectively without betraying yourself because you don't care about people's opinion of you. So this is the sort of trait. This is nicer people are easier to con because they're more trusting, because 9 times out of 10 they've had a sort of more pleasant experience where they're not used to being conned, and so they don't expect people to lie to them. They don't expect people to try and trick them. They don't expect people to be violent towards them, or try and con them out of money or something like that, because they haven't experienced that. You get someone who's just come out of prison for 20 years. He's going to be far more cautious than Jeanette, who's lived on the cul-de-sac for the past 25 years in blissful marriage and her 2 children. So again, all of these things can be utilized in some sense to manipulate people. You believe your own bullshit, you can carry it off with bluster, which is why you have press agents, PR agents and stuff like that bigging you up, telling you like, of course you're gorgeous, of course you're fabulous, people love you, you're amazing. You have yes men, because thinking it is being it. In order to achieve success, you must project an image of success at all time. I don't believe that. That's a nonsense bullshit saying that people use. But this is the concept behind it, basically.
I've got to say, Neil, it sure has been just a pleasure to speak with you. And I'd like our audience to go to neilsandersmindcontrol.com if you want to learn about different marketing tactics, sales techniques, media programming, on how they sell their package to you unknowingly. You definitely want to pick up this work that he's put together. Now, your mind, your thoughts are not your own, volumes 1 and 2. Any other gems you want to share with us tonight, Neil, before we close out?
Well, my thing is don't be afraid, because fear is the mind killer, or fear eats the soul, whichever that you want to do. So you've got to appreciate that the majority of tactics that are utilized to elicit control play on your fears of minorities, your fears of economic ruin, your fears of disease, your fears of difference, your fears of war, your fears of loneliness, your fears of isolation, your fears of not being understood by a cold, indifferent world. And that's not to say that there's no validity to any of your fears, but what is is true is that nefarious people will play on these in order to manipulate you to do what they want you to do. And so despite the fact that I've spent the past 2 hours talking about really horrific, horrible stuff, I'm going to be completely contradictory now by saying you've got to try not to be afraid. And again, people often say, like, how do you fight the New World Order, such as it is, if it exists? How do you fight the Illuminati? What solutions have we got? And again, my answer to that is, what is it that they're stopping you from doing? What is it that you want to do that you feel that you're not able to do? Okay, well, let's try and figure out a way that you can do that. Do that first, and then we'll worry about the New World Order, because there's no point everybody sort of clamoring together. There has to be a certain degree of self sort of belief and self understanding and self happiness before we can come together as a collective. And that's not to say that will never happen, and it's not to say that I am in that particular state at the minute, but not in a selfish way, not in a way that you abandon other people by any stretch of the imagination, because I think that's part of the thing about growing to be a person, is that you help other people. You be nice, just be nice. That would be my other message. Just be nice to people, for crying out loud, right? Okay. I found that it makes life far easier than not being. And if you're not in a state of fear, it's a lot easier not to lash out at people. I'd also like to say, I know this is terrible, shilling, but my book is also available on Kindle via Amazon if people want to go and get it there. So I know some people don't like paying with PayPal and stuff like that, and which is, you have to do from my website and stuff like that. And I know that it's people don't like books, and it's quite a lot of money and whatnot. But there's a far cheaper version available on Kindle if people would like to get that.
Hey, fantastic. And I mean, the information that you've got in your book is great. I think it's fantastic. Some of this stuff is literally priceless. I mean, if you really think about it, if you can take a few gems or steps or keys to put into your pouch or your backpack or your vault, then you can use those at specific times, and they can literally be invaluable. And you've got some great work, man. I love talking to you. I mean, just even as we could talk about normal stuff too, I'm sure, because you just really bring a good energy to the table and not just diving into the dark underbelly of mind control tactics. appreciated you coming on the show. And folks, make sure to go to leakproject.com. If you help us out by becoming a contributing member at leakproject.com, you will get access to exclusive content. It's all downloadable, streamable, ad-free. You can put it on your smartphone. You can listen to it later if you're on the road. You don't have access to cell phone coverage or something. And also pick up your high-quality vinyl decal today for $10. Make people aware and support freedom. Thanks, everybody. Be the change you want to see. Talk to you soon. Illuminati, cutting-edge mind control technology, global subliminal control grid, Nil Sanders, Black Ops, Beyond MK Ultra, pattern recognition, latest leak project. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We have returning guest Nil Sanders with us. If you go to nilsandersmindcontrol.com, you can learn more about Nil and the nefarious mind control tactics used throughout the brain drain media, news, television, and radio programming. Author of Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own, Volumes 1 and 2. Have you ever wondered if politicians, CEOs, and other influential speakers have the natural ability to control people's minds or influence people in subtle and subliminal fashion? Do you personally get emotionally attached to different candidates running for political office? Then you might be influenced via subconsciously and not even know it. Hence, your thoughts are not your own. Neil, we are on different sides of the world in completely different time zones. You are in beautiful Nottingham, home of the archetypal icon, Robin Hood. How cool is that? Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. It's a pleasure to speak with you at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be invited back. It's not as cool as you would think. I'll tell you that now. Like, in case anyone was going to come to Nottingham and think, "Oh wow, I'm going to bask in this Robin Hood loveliness," it's a very small city. It's not very good at all. But hey, what can you do?
Well, you are where you are, and it seems like people are raised in certain locations sometimes for specific reasons. But it's funny, we talked before the show, and you were telling me about how Robin Hood really isn't exploited like you would think he would be in that area. It's kind of, if you ever go to Roswell, New Mexico, everything there has an alien face on it because of the Roswell crash. Even the McDonald's has a UFO on the sign. So it's just, that's what you think of when you think of Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, there's Shield Forest, which is apparently the forest where I used to live and such like that. But it's just bizarre the way that you'd think, this is an international thing. You've got films with Kevin Costner and Russell Crowe and Errol Flynn and all these people, incredible stars. You would think they would capitalize on it, and for whatever reason, they just don't. And I don't think it's humility. I think it's laziness, to be quite honest. I don't think it's like, no, let's just play this one cool. I just don't think anyone's got the wherewithal to do anything with it. But hey, what can you do?
Exactly. Just maybe it's a good thing. Maybe for now, if it got to that point, you'd have people coming from all over the world with Robin Hood outfits on. And go, where's he at, man?
Well, maybe. But hey, what can you do?
Right. So if we could get into, I watched the presidential debates, both of them so far, and the first one I looked at, and I'm watching these guys going, seriously, these are our best two options? It's just a slap in the face on both sides. But there was a couple of good points, I think, that Donald made last night as far as military tactics when he said, well, if you're going to go blow a country up, it's probably not a good idea to give them 4 to 6 weeks notice and tell them when you're going to attack them. It'd be a much better idea to just go in silently, take out the top brass, and then, then when it's done, you go tell the media about it after that. But just the way the whole system's played, there's so much money and profiteering in defense contracts, etc. That's just the way the world turns, and that's a whole other episode. But
I agree, but wouldn't that be a war crime?
To go, you mean take somebody out silently through the night?
Yeah, without due process or whatever. Just like, I assume that these options are on the table, and there is an argument that basically, they want to draw out wars and such like that. But I really don't know, to be quite honest.
I'm not a defense contractor expert, and that's actually something I should do more research into because I'm sure it'd help with some of the shows that I do. But if you look at it from a logical standpoint, if you want to win a war, it's probably not the best idea to give your enemy your insider info. But regardless, I mean, it's just crazy the times we live in. I think that all these wars and proxy wars that go on are kind of orchestrated at certain levels anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. They're profiteering. They're corporate wars, aren't they? This is the point of them. They're a reason why why certain people are targeted, and they're essentially resource. Like a lot of the time, all of the sort of most recent wars, in fact, most of the wars are essentially they're ways of stealing resources or stealing land or influencing political change in an illegal manner that is justifiable in the eyes of the general public. So it's easy to say stuff like that, but it's very it's a microcosm of a very, very complicated issue. There may well be an element of truth in that and such like that. And so, we want to end wars as quickly as possible. But I think that ignores the reasons that people go into wars, which is the profiteering and such like that. I don't think it's as straightforward, as simple as that.
Well, that's where the mind control comes in my opinion. And maybe we could talk about that because you've written extensively on mind control. When the media... It seems like you've got this problem reaction solution. Let's go back to 9/11 for a second. Before 9/11 happens... Several months prior, the media literally is just pushing down people's throats in the mainstream news. Al-Qaeda showing video footage over and over again of bin Laden and his homeboys going across a bunch of monkey bars with AK-47 strapped to their back.
Oh, yeah, that film that was filmed in Pakistan, yeah.
And just over and over and over and over. So when 9/11 happens, the immediate thought process in everybody's minds, and plus they were really bashing Saddam Hussein as well. So at least in America, most people's mindsets when they saw the towers collapse, it's Al-Qaeda and it's Saddam Hussein. They're in on it together. And so what our military does is they go in after Saddam Hussein and they go after bin Laden. But people get all patriotic. They think that, okay, we need to join together, hold hands, kumbaya for each other, but go attack everybody else. It's not a part of this system. So it seems like fear is so powerful in the subconscious that the powers that be know how to literally influence the world and put a veil over most people's heads, and they can't see through the BS.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were many lies in that. I mean, one of the most important lies was that Iraq had obviously nothing to do with it, and they were actively fighting against Al-Qaeda. So there was no connection between the Iraqi government and Al-Qaeda either. And so that was a further lie. I mean, I am strongly of the belief that it wasn't really Al-Qaeda that caused the attack. So there's another lie. But the problem is that, the scenario basically created an incredible tension in people. It was, it's an incredibly traumatic event, and people don't. When trauma happens, people don't tend to want to go, right, okay, let's sit down calmly and think about this. They want quick answers, and this is where people can start to manipulate you. And this is certainly what was seen in the American media. I think it was the day afterwards that George Bush essentially gave a speech saying, I think he actually said, I'm sure he actually said the words, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists, basically saying that, look, do exactly what we say, we'll sort it out for you. Like showing that sort of archetype of a parent or whatever, an authoritarian figure that can come in and solve all your problems for you, like particularly when you're in a traumatized state. And the thing about trauma is it tends to it makes you malleable. It wipes your brain, essentially, or it can wipe your brain, and it basically leaves you in a state whereby you can be, for want of a better word, programmed. This goes back to sort of Pavlovian conditioning and such like that. He discovered that these dogs that he was training, they'd lost all their conditioning because they nearly drowned, and basically they lost everything that they learned, and then you have to relearn them, reteach them certain things. But if you can use this mechanism of trauma, it can basically reduce people to a vegetative state. It can reduce people to if you think of the example of like a child basically who's lost in a supermarket or something like that, they become completely helpless and will look to anybody for help and reassurance and sort of shrink into themselves. That's exactly the sort of response that is gained by even in adults by extensive trauma, particularly if you do it again and again and again and again and again. And I'm sure we've mentioned this before, but this is essentially by sheer coincidence, for whatever reason, this is the the raison d'etre of the Tavistock Institute, which is a psychological sort of think tank connected to military and industrial complexes and corporate entities and such like that in the UK. And Kurt Lewin essentially said that this is what we want to do. And so this is the best way to control nations. This is a way to make them yearn for an authoritarian figure to come in from a senior position and basically sort the world out for them.
Now, Tavistock, they were involved, or maybe still are involved, with a lot of the bands that are really popular, right? They're heavily invested in media.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, it's difficult to say, really. Not that I know of. With the sort of, I mean, they're interested in all aspects of psychology. They're interested in family psychology, child psychology, workplace psychology. They're interested in training corporate entities, CEOs of massive blue chip organizations like Unilever and BP and such like that, in authority training, teaching them to be better CEOs and more productive CEOs. They also offer the same service to politicians and aspects of the British and American military, and also surprising entities like the postal service and such like that. To teaching these organisations to work to the Tavistock sort of ideology, essentially. And they were sort of they were completely behind the startup of certain organizations in America, like Stanford Research Institute and the National Institute of Mental Health and the Esalen Institute and MIT and the Wharton School of Economics and that type of thing. So they certainly have a broad ranging brief, so to speak. I'm not sure about the sort of entertainment arm of it. I wouldn't be at all surprised. I've heard of the concept of them starting the Beatles and writing the Beatles songs through the work of Theodore Adorno. But I don't. There's only one source for that, to be quite honest. And the work that Adorno was doing on music was about atonal music and such like that. And he wasn't a fan of pop culture and such like that. So I don't know as that's true. It may well be. It comes from the is it the Coleman book, I believe, but it may well be true. He probably knows more about it than I do. But other than that reference to it, I've never seen anything that would suggest that was true, to be quite honest.
Now, Tavistock also, if they're connected with different colleges and have a lot of influence, I wonder about when I read news articles that come out a lot with Stanford University or other institutions that say, we found planet X, we found Nibiru, or they won't say they found Nibiru, they'll say they found a new planet every other year, it seems like, and they'll make it sound as if it's planet X and it's incoming, but it's not at the same time. So it's like they're playing both sides of the coin with these articles. What are your thoughts on that?
It's like it's an experiment, seeing what people are going to do with the information. It's a reaction stimulus experiment. They start certain projects. I mean, it was out of places like the Esalen Institute that the Human Potential Movement started. This is not to denigrate anybody that's involved in this type of thing, but stuff like transcendental meditation and yoga and to an extent the free love movement and such like that came out, the Human Potential Movement. And it was, provably started as an offshoot of MK Often, which was an offshoot of MK Ultra. Now, it doesn't mean that there's anything nefarious about it, but what it means is that they were using this as a way to study behavior and a way to study reaction and a way to study how they can manipulate people. And it's as simple as that. They weren't looking to learn anything from people they weren't looking to, let's see these flower children and they can teach us how to be better people. That's not what it was about. What it was about was, okay, let's create a situation and see what our rats in a maze do. And you know what? That might have been a very pleasant scenario or situation. There might have actually been some very positive outcomes with it and such like that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, this was, particularly this aspect of it, was provably part of an experiment and a documenting expedition, basically trying to study the hippie, so to speak, in this particular scenario. So, yes, they have their fingers in all sorts of pies.
Now, what are they doing now? What's the cutting edge stuff that you've seen that they're taking advantage of on the people?
Well, the most up to date technology that I've heard about, silent sound is quite old hat now. That was used in the first Gulf War, actually. So that's many years ago now. That's an army process.
Can we jump into that? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
that I've heard that there was these mind control tones and stuff used specifically in the first Gulf War, and that's why many of the soldiers just gave up so quickly. But I haven't been able to pinpoint that via fact. But I've talked to some insiders, literally, that were a part of these mind control programs. I mean, even all the way up to Michael Aquino. This guy is the military top brass, and there's a lot of as far as mind control tactics and getting into the head of people. So let's talk about that.
Well, it's called Silent Sound or S Quad or the S Spectrum or 4 Quad, or there's loads of different variant names for it. I believe it was a chap called Oliver Lowry that actually patented it. But essentially, what it is sub-oral manipulation. There's sometimes they use music to cover it, sometimes they don't. It's messages that bleed into your brain that you don't pick up on a conscious level, but you definitely pick up on a subconscious level. And what these messages do is, certainly what was reported, and this was reported in Newsweek, for crying out loud. They were putting feelings of despair into the Iraqi soldiers. Now, there's several sort of proofs that this actually happened. I mean, you could take the sort of the footage where you see dozens and dozens of Iraqi soldiers, like basically just, weapons above their heads, throwing the weapons down, hands above their heads, walking in lines. They were in concrete bunkers. They were very well embedded. There was no real reason for them to give up. Now, what is certainly strange is that there was a quote that was given on a news channel from a general, and I don't have the name, but it is in my first book. And basically, he let slip that they were well embedded in, but we sent over a few helicopters with some speakers on there. Speakers meaning, radio, speakers, speakers like you would have in your hi-fi system. God, I'm old. Like, no one has hi-fis anymore.